I actually started the business at the final year of university, and then basically straight after decided to, I thought I was Elon Musk and I could run multiple businesses at the same time. Lesson learned, definitely not. I did really have quite a chip on my shoulder. I'm not doing something that's cool enough. It really drove me to go, well, what else can I do here that's going to be more significant, bring more status? And so I was like, I'll do a tech startup, That's the way to go about it. That was both like a blessing and a curse, that whole experience. What I had done well, at least, is I'd put a team in place at Smart that became really fantastic custodians of it while I was distracted, chasing things that at the time were going to some emotional need that I hadn't yet recognised.
Welcome to Getting to the Heart of Business, brought to you by The Online Co, where we believe the best way to help small and medium businesses grow is by putting people first. I'm James Parnwell, and in this episode, you'll meet a guy who's helping a generation of young people figure out their life's direction. His name is Rowan Kunz, and he's the director at student coaching and mentoring business Art of Smart. My co-host and marketing pro with me today is Jess Caluso. G'day, Jess.
Hey, James.
HSC is a really difficult time for young people.
Yes, it is.
Do you have any memories of that stage?
My most vivid memory of my HSC is just writing copious amounts of notes. I was one of those people that had to write things down in order to remember it.
So you'd learn best that way?
Yeah, I would. So I just notes after notes after notes.
Yeah.
I just feel like I was drowning in paper. And I remember specifically, actually, I burnt all of my HSC
I did that
notes
too.
after I'd finished.
See you later.
Yeah.
A ritual burning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I studied very hard, too hard. And Rowan talks about people who were able to maintain their kind of extracurricular activities as well as perform well in their HSC. And I maintained some of mine, but I would just work from dawn till dusk, just
studying.
Yeah, just hardcore. Which was good in a way, got me better marks, but was I needed some time afterward to rest, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I could have done with Rowan's help when I was doing my HSC, because I was quite a high achieving sports person in my high school years and went to a sports high school. So I definitely had to learn how to balance the extracurricular activities and the HSC studying.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as you're about to hear in our interview, Rowan doesn't just help kids with their study techniques and their math scores, although that's part of it. His aim is really to help provide a very holistic type of mentoring to help young people figure out what they're passionate about, set some clear goals and achieve them, partly through good study techniques, but also by building a life that's more happy, healthy, organised and well-rounded. What I found fascinating about Rowan is how young he was when he started out as an entrepreneur. He was in his early 20s and hadn't even finished uni. Rowan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, James.
So you started business at a very young age. I wanted to say straight out of uni, but you were kind of innovating at uni. So what was it you were studying?
So I was doing a combined law degree. So I was doing an arts degree majoring in history and law, and realised pretty quickly on that I didn't want to become a lawyer. Pretty much by second year, I'd got in, had an exposure to it. Intellectually, it's a fascinating subject. It teaches you to think, but realised that the day-to-day in terms of what work would look like was just not something that excited me. So then I was in this position of, okay, I know what I don't want to do in my life.
Which is useful in itself. It's a good step, yes. Yep. But what to do is a much harder question.
That's right, definitely. Much harder question.
So what sort of happened? Did something emerge?
Yeah, I really fell into working with some family friends. When I was in high school myself, I'd had an elite sports background. I wanted to one day play professional football, round ball.
Round ball, yes.
Get that right.
Soccer, yeah.
And so I'd sort of navigated this journey of trying to train and pursue sport while also trying to balance and have a plan B. And so I had, at that point, some family friends and word of mouth, people really reach out who was saying, hey, like, I'm in that similar position, like I'm, in years 11 or 12 and I'm a tennis player, or I'm a rugby union player, or I'm wanting to pursue theatre and the performing arts, and I want to do well at school just because I want to have that plan B, but how do I balance it all? And so I really just started falling into, it was a sort of tutoring / mentoring role, much more holistic, big picture with these young people, and sort of really fell in love with it. It was just an incredible experience.
So how did you balance it all?
That's a big question.
Right, because the common thing is, I'm just going to switch my life off for year 11 and 12.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to switch school off and do whatever else it is I want to do. Like getting both of them together is a challenge.
It is a challenge. And I think, look, one of the things that definitely I think was really critical was understanding that quality was more important than quantity. And that really applied to both pursuits.
Okay.
I think a lot of the time, and this is not just really about school. I think this is something that applies to life much more broadly. I think an attitude can be, to do well at school, shall we say, I've got to just throw hours at this thing. And inevitably, we just procrastinate a lot. We're staring at a wall. We're on YouTube. We're doing anything but the hard work that we probably should be. I think we've probably done that at work from time to time as well.
Right.
And so it was a realization of actually, no, quality matters. So even if I've only got 45 minutes of time because I've got to go to training, like how do I make the best use of that 45, and then being much more intentional about what it was that I was actually doing rather than getting in and doing busy work.
So it's potentially the 80-20 rule, that 80% of the value is in 20% of the time.
That's right. And something we teach students actually as a framework to just get them to think more intentionally. So I'd say that was one. And then the second thing is we have a concept we call transition moments, which is that we often have all these transition moments in our lives, where we're waiting for a bus or, we're waiting in a line or we've got some time to kill. And often that's exactly what we do with it. We kill it, right?
Flip through Instagram or,
Precisely, right? You pull out your phone or you just flop in front of the TV or whatever. And often those little transition moments can add up over a day. And we tend to round them down in our minds. Even if it was half an hour, often we're like, that's not enough time to do anything meaningful.
Okay.
And it was also a realization, if you've got multiple commitments, you need to take advantage of those small chunks of transition moment time because you can actually add them up to become something quite significant. So two simple things. There's a whole bunch more, but I would say, those were two critical things.
Yeah, that's excellent. And probably applicable to business as well.
I think so, yeah, without a doubt.
Speaking of which, you've got people asking you the question, how did you balance that? And then you started helping them.
Yeah, that's right. Really, it was a process where they were like, how did you do it? And to be honest, at the start, I didn't have good answers for them necessarily either. I had some things that worked for me only. So for some students, I had really great success just because, they maybe were at a similar wavelength or personality type to me, and I'd share a strategy and then apply it and we'd have great results, it'd be awesome. And then I'd work with another student and I'd, pull out this sort of strategy from the toolkit and it would just flop.
Because they're very different. They're just wired differently.
Precisely. They were just wired differently. And so sort of two things happened for me. I guess one, I saw the impact that I could have on a young person's life. That was really exciting for me. As another young person, I was able to see that I could have an impact.
And there was one specific student who didn't like economics.
Yeah, that's
Most people don't like economics. I have to confess, I quite like economics.
Yeah, I'm a bit of an economics nerd. Yeah, and there was this moment definitely where I was working with a student who had hated economics, had to take it to just meet some minimum subject requirements in terms of the number. And by the end of the year, his attitude had transitioned so much so that he chose to study economics as his core degree at university. And so that was really almost an oh crap moment for me because it really showed just, wow, okay, like I can have a significant impact here. That's super exciting. Also quite a responsibility. I want to make sure I'm doing a good job. And that was really the point where I was in my final year of my law degree and I was really looking at, what am I going to do in a year? And so I decided I'd go and interview, to start with, 100 past students that had done incredibly well academically while balancing life.
Right.
And the idea was really to identify what were the common patterns in how they grappled with the typical challenges, but also to see just a broader toolkit. So it wasn't just what worked for me and I was just sharing this as some, individual that had magically worked something out. It was actually, no, here's some research that we've been able to do that identifies that there are a couple of different approaches you could take here to deal with this problem. That was just a critical step, I think, in one, getting greater confidence in how we were supporting students, but then also I think for myself and really solidifying it into something that was more than just a hobby
Like
at
a
university.
uni job. Some people make hamburgers. You were teaching.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
and now I'm going to get a real job.
Yeah, precisely.
Because no doubt there was a time where you had to have a conversation with your parents.
Definitely, yes.
How'd that go?
Look, it's quite interesting because my parents come from very different backgrounds. So, my father's from Switzerland. His family have run businesses for generations. He himself has run businesses. That's not to say that my mother's family hasn't had some of that background. She's from Sri Lanka. Her focus has always been perhaps a little more traditional, though, in the sense of, university and education and the importance of it.
Yep.
So I know she was probably a little more concerned.
Yeah.
Both were incredibly supportive, really, from a position of what's going to make you happy, what's going to make a difference in the world. But certainly I could definitely feel a little bit more of the anxiety coming off my mum than my dad, yeah.
All right, so I often feel like businesses can either originate in your head or your heart or your hands. It's like the head is, I've got this great idea, or your heart is something I'm passionate about. And your hands is often, I've just, this thing's here and I'm doing it. It sounds like it probably landed in your hands and then it's transitioned to your heart and your head. Would that be fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think very much when I started the journey, I had no anticipation.
No 10-year rollout plan?
No, there was none of that. I couldn't have foreseen the journey that it's taken me on. I couldn't have foreseen, where we are today. But I couldn't even foresee where it would have taken me 12 months at the time.
Yep.
It was very much just a rolling with, the opportunity, and also just leaning in. And, I think in hindsight, having the courage to not pursue the law degree. And that was quite challenging, honestly.
There's a momentum in a direction, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And particularly, I think when you're going to university, and there's an expectation and a momentum. I like to call it an inertia almost, right? Yeah. That you will then pursue that as a career afterwards. And when everyone else in your degree is applying for internships and clerkships and talking about all the job offers,
my degree was the same. Yeah,
it's quite hard to resist. And so I quite intentionally, because I knew that I didn't want to pursue a degree, made no effort to apply for any graduate job, which was definitely the thing that I think concerned my parents a little bit. None. And it was,
Rowan's going to be living at home forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely it. And it was a bit of a burn the boat strategy in my part. I knew that if I did apply for something, I'd probably take it just because of the social expectation and the fact that it's often quite attractive, you're going into a graduate program and, you're earning some money for the first time, proper, because, you've had uni jobs along the way. And I knew that if I did that, I wouldn't come back to this, in terms of this passion and this problem that I was seeing. And so it really was a bit of burn the bridges, not apply. Okay. And I also realised that probably as a young person, still being able to live at home.
Yeah.
That's often the easiest time if you want to take a risk. So that definitely informed the thinking quite a lot.
So at some point you started hiring tutors?
Yeah, so that began in the final year of university. So I did the research with, high-performing students, wrote a book, and that was part of sort of the product or the launch of the business. So the intent was to launch the book as part of the research and really part of the value proposition that we would then bring to the market. And that was an interesting experience. Obviously I'd never written a book before. I sort of did the research, pitched it to a bunch of publishers. They all said no. They're like, who are you? You're this 21-year-old kid. What expertise do you have? And then, some of them said, well, look, even if we did consider this, it's a 3-year timeline. And I'm pretty impatient. I like to get things going. I'm like, 3 years?
So their objection was more about you and your experience more than the content?
There was an element where they felt that it needed to be broadened from, an audience that might have been East Coast to something more national. But that was a pretty surmountable challenge, in the sense of you interview a couple more students across...
In Perth, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. So, in a big part of it, it was a mixture of they wondered whether or not there would be... a sufficient market, but a lot of it really, I think, came down to I was a nobody. I'm this, 20, 21-year-old kid who had written this thing, and so in the end, I went, I'm just going to take a bet on myself here. Worst case, I'll self-publish. I'm a published author. I lose some money on this. I put it on a credit card to sort of print it in Hong Kong. Worst case, I lose some money. Yeah, okay, that's not great. $10,000 as a 21-year-old is a bit of money, but really grand scheme of things, if I go and get a job and work for 6 months, I'll pay it off. But what I felt was the reputational benefit it would provide would be significantly worth more than that in the long term. And so I ended up just self-publishing. Ordered almost 3,000 books because you got a better price.
Yeah, it gets a bit cheaper.
Yeah,
the more
and
you print.
I didn't realise how many 3,000 books actually were.
Is it a pallet?
Yeah, it's a pallet and a half.
Okay.
Right, and I remember getting it delivered, and they dropped it off at my parents' place on the driveway.
Yeah.
A pallet and a half of books,
Yeah.
and my parents are looking at me, going, "Where are you going to store these?
Yeah.
We don't have the room." And then I had the problem of, how was I going to sell it? Like, I actually hadn't even thought about that. Like, I literally just went, great. I had this vague idea of, I'll write the book, I'll launch the business, we'll generate demand, and then we'll start hiring people, right? Like, that was the extent of the plan. But the critical step in there is I hadn't thought about, well, how do I sell this thing?
Yeah, marketing the book.
Yeah, how do I actually market this thing? Quite fortunate, I was able to find an education-specific distributor. Was able to get the book into your Dimmicks and Angus Robertsons and your Borders. I mean, a lot of these guys are no longer around.
No, sadly, yeah.
So in the end, good outcome, but didn't plan it very well, to be really honest. And then definitely, as part of doing that, it led to opportunities to go into schools to speak, opportunities to go into local libraries, and that helped just build the early sort of brand awareness and reputation so that we started generating increased inquiries.
Okay.
And then we got to a tipping point where, I just didn't have the time to be able to work with the students or the expertise, in many respects.
Okay, subjects that you weren't familiar with.
That's right, yeah. And so it went, all right, this makes sense. Let's start bringing on a couple of other tutors. And, I think by the end of that first year, we had about 13 other tutors. And then I graduated uni. And by that point, I sort of went, well, you know what? It's still very nascent. It's still very early stage, but there's something here. There's an opportunity here.
So the book was really your primary marketing tactic to say, I exist, here's my research, my knowledge, and to create, I guess, an authority in the space.
Yeah, that's right.
And
definitely.
that's brought customers, but it's also brought staff.
Yeah, I think it did. I think from the sense that it if you were a tutor looking to find work, and you knew that you were able to work with a business that had done some research and written a book, and the business leader was considered to be an expert, it certainly helped, particularly when we were so early stage in attracting some people to work with us, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of your family and their business experience, I've been reading about young entrepreneurs, and in the particular group, there was 11 out of 12 of the people that were interviewed had parents that owned businesses.
Wow.
And the assumption was, if you have a parent that thinks that way, you think that way, and if you don't, you don't. Would you see in your childhood and in your family that sort of entrepreneurial thinking, out of the box thinking was accepted and embraced?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my father has run businesses at different points as long as I can remember. An uncle on my mother's side, successful entrepreneur, run a number of businesses as well. So I think I had role models at least. Not, and it wasn't that they ever explicitly talked to me about.
No, that's what's interesting, I think.
Yeah, it was never where it was like, oh, hey, here's what we're doing, and this is. It was just I could see it. I could
you almost
see.
Marinate in the culture, don't you?
I think so. That's right. And so it meant that starting your own thing was a viable alternative.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, your parents didn't fund your business. They didn't launch you.
Well, short of, being kind to, pay for food while I was living at home.
Living in home.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that goes a long way, right? In
Yeah.
terms of, that gave me, and I can't thank them enough for that, really, it gave me 2 years where I didn't have to worry about a roof over my head and food, which, makes a huge difference.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. Not starving is helpful for your business progress.
But I think it also means you can focus on something full time. I think for a lot of people that don't have that opportunity to have that family support, or at least to that extent, you're working somewhere else and you've got a side hustle. And you're trying to make the side hustle work and get it to the tipping point where you can sort of turn, one thing off that's a viable pathway, but I think it's challenging. And so I'm certainly very grateful that I had the opportunity to be able to just do it, and not have to worry about that.
The other thing is that in today's economy, there's so much change technology-wise, and there's always the talk that people are studying for jobs that won't exist by the time they get there. So being entrepreneurial or being agile is a pretty useful skill. And but having that pathway to say, hey, I can go and create something based on an opportunity I see.
Definitely. Well, I think employers in many cases are really looking for people that have entrepreneurial skill sets. I mean, I think a lot of what it means to run a business is being a good project manager, being able to lead and manage people, being able to problem solve, often high levels of innovation and creativity. I think all of those are really powerful skill sets where you can take them into a business as well. So one of the things that we see is definitely this idea that starting a business is what we call an asymmetric bet. In the sense that it's a win-win if you're a young person, because if you create it, you're going to develop a whole lot of really incredible skills that actually increase your employability. A good example of it is the ability to present and speak in front of groups of people has almost a $9,000 salary premium. And if you run your own business, one of the first things you learn to do is to pitch. You're selling yourself, you're selling your business. Precisely, right? So it really forces you to develop these skills that are in demand and also are rewarded in terms of salary premium. And so if you start the business and it doesn't work out, right, it fails. I think the costs these days of starting businesses are a lot lower. Unless, you're doing a restaurant, you've got a full fit out and there's all sorts of costs.
Right.
Most businesses, you can start very, very cost effectively. So I think the sort of downside increasingly gets a lot smaller from a financial risk point of view.
Yeah.
And then the career risk is, I actually think, incredibly low, and if not a positive, because even if it doesn't work, all of a sudden you're able to go to an employer and have a whole lot of really marketable skill sets and also like project and real world experience that you can highlight to them that's often a lot more advanced because you've had to just do everything.
Look, we love hiring people that have had their own business.
Yeah.
They think differently. They're multi-skilled. Yeah,
definitely.
They're great to have. All right, we're 11 years on. Are your dreams and motivations different now?
Definitely, yeah. So I actually started the business 11 years ago, but didn't work full time in it until end of 2017.
Okay.
So I'd started it at the final year of university, and then basically straight after university decided to, I thought I was Elon Musk and I could run multiple businesses at the same time. Lesson learned, definitely not. Definitely, some humble pie along the way. But, started another business. Again, very passionate about education, very passionate about wanting to make a difference for young people. Started a TripAdvisor for universities, so we aggregated tens of thousands of reviews from students all around Australia across different degrees, different universities. So if you were thinking about making a choice to go to university, you could actually get, instead of the lovely branded marketing from the university, you could get student
People's
experience.
Opinions, yeah.
That's right. So I sort of jumped into that, and in hindsight, a lot of that was because even though I did have the courage at the time to not pursue law as a career, I did really have quite a chip on my shoulder, and I didn't recognise it at the time, about not pursuing the law degree. There was a prestige that had come with it. When all of your peers are now working in corporate and sharing all these stories about life in corporate and the perks and the benefits. It does have an impact, and I didn't appreciate it, but there had been a bit of a chip on my shoulder around, hey, I'm not doing something that's cool enough. Yeah. And so it sort of prompted me, I didn't realise it, but really drove me to go, well, what else can I do here that's going to be more significant, bring more status? And so I was like, I'll do a tech startup, that's the way to go about it. And look, great experience. I'm very grateful for it. I was very fortunate that 18 months after sort of starting that platform, that business was acquired. So I got incredibly lucky. There was no revenue. So I didn't have a pathway to even work out how we would turn it into a profitable business. So I was very, very lucky, but
Is that still going?
So no, unfortunately, the business that acquired it they were working as part of, like, with Career One, taking on Seek in sort of, linking education to career. I don't think they ended up being able to take it to where they wanted to, at least from what I've observed. But that was both like a blessing and a curse, that whole experience, for me personally, because I think I had decided I wanted to do something, that would have more significance, whatever that means. And then 18 months in, had built and sold a business all at a very young age. And so, really, I think the bad thing was just where it went for my ego. I think alongside all of this, what I had done well, at least, and I'm so grateful for that, is I'd put a team in place at Arta Smart who would continue to run the business in those early stages. And I'd sort of read E-Myth, loved it, put in the systems, and to be really honest, found a couple of incredible people who are still with the business to this day that really, I think, became really fantastic custodians of it while I was distracted, doing these other things and chasing things that at the time were, going to, I think, satisfy some emotional need that I hadn't yet recognised. So the reason I say this in answer to your question is that, yes, by all means, how I view what I do today now has changed quite a lot.
It's changed because you've gone on a few tangents.
That's right.
When I speak with small and medium business owners, I generally find that they don't really know what their competitors are up to. I wonder if you've ever taken the time to analyse the competitive landscape of your industry. When we do this for clients, we typically find either there's a hero out there, somebody who has taken the time to craft their message, think through their overall strategy, and is executing it awesomely, and they are probably dominating your market. The second thing we find is that nobody's really picked up the act. That gives you a real opportunity to be the hero straight up. You're probably in one of those places where you can look at that hero and take some ideas from what they're doing. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Or alternatively, you can get out there ahead of the pack. This is just one of the ideas we talk about in our digital marketing playbook. If you feel that this would be helpful for your business, please feel free to book a quick chat at theonlineco.net. Because there was another startup, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's right. So then after that success, it was like, great, like, I know what I'm doing. Didn't know what I was doing at all, but thought I did. And so, again, passionate about education, passionate about technology. Started another business in the sector. We'd seen a product in the United States called the Khan Academy. It was free video tutorials online, gamified. We saw that and thought, what, great. Why don't we bring that to Australia, put it in a game-based environment, but put a monthly subscription on top of it. So put a paywall on top and charge people for it. Incredibly cheap compared to the alternative of, getting tutoring. You're accessing videos from amazing educators at low cost. So we built all that out very quickly, launched it, very quickly found, within sort of 9 months, probably 6 or 7 other competitors in the market. The barrier to entry wasn't significantly high. Content and video was, starting to get cheaper with the YouTube generation to create. And so we looked at that and then went, you know what, we're going to be playing a race to the bottom on margins.
On price,
on price. We have a technical team. Let's pivot around the underlying platform that we've built. Because we were the only team out of all of the competitors that hadn't outsourced something overseas. Like, we'd brought in part of our team. And so we ended up building basically a teaching and learning platform for schools that would help teachers remove a one-size-fits-all classroom. So to enable them to really simply just drag and drop, create an individual playlist of learning. So if students had particular needs, they could start to better meet those needs. And that was a 6-year journey. It was a challenging journey, without a doubt. None of us in our initial founding team were teachers. We knew education well, but not as well as we thought. Again, I think we came in with this sort of vision that we had the solution, we could solve it because we would bring the best from tech and design and business and build something. And by all means, we brought a lot of that, but I think where we struggled for a number of years was just truly understanding the complexity of the challenge that we were trying to solve. Fortunately, what that experience gave me, though, was an ability to go around schools all around Australia some of the most innovative schools, spend so much time with all these incredible, educators and principals and leaders in the sector. And I think what I was really grateful eventually through that experience was it really sparked in me like a bigger sense of what our mission should be at Art of Smart and what I felt we really needed to be doing. And so in the end, what happened was I actually stepped down as CEO of that organisation. It was a 12-month sort of process. Myself and my co-founder sold most of our stake in the business. It was then later on acquired by one of the larger education technology companies in Australia, but so that I could come back into Art of Smart. Because I'd really felt this strong vision for what we needed to do and the difference we needed to make. Really sort of went back to the sort of core of why I'd started the thing. Why I'd started the thing was ultimately about service. It wasn't about me. It was about helping other people. And along the way, I'd lost some of that, not necessarily for Art of Smart, but in chasing some of these other things that I was doing. And so a lot of it was really about recognizing like, hey, there's a real problem here. We have 1 million young Australians that graduate high school every 4 years, but 1 in 3 university graduates, struggle to find a full-time job. 1 in 3 young people are underemployed or unemployed. It takes almost 4.7 years for a person who has a university degree in Australia to get a full-time job.
Right.
And that's scary because on the face of it, we're sort of told as a society, hey, the pathway to long-term success and security is get good grades at school,
get a degree,
go to university, get a job. And I saw that and went, whoa, wait a minute, that's no longer this slam dunk pathway anymore. We're going to have some problems here. We're going to have some problems as a country if we keep on just encouraging young people to pursue that pathway and they keep making the same sort of decisions about the degrees that they pursue at university. Because what we're going to end up with is we're going to end up with a generation of young people that are unemployed or underemployed. And this is all pre-COVID data. COVID has just exacerbated this even more for young people. And then that has huge impacts on mental health. It has huge impacts on long-term wealth creation because of the compounding effect. If you can't get a job, a full-time job, you're less likely to contribute to super, you're less likely to be able to afford some form of property in Australia. And that has just longer-term consequences. And so I really saw a lot of that and went, wow, we need to start having the conversation, first of all, that this is happening. And two, well, where do we think and where do I think we can make the biggest difference and where do my skill sets serve the most? And I really felt, well, look, those final years of high school particularly are really the point where you're making the decision about maybe what you do. And once you make that decision, the inertia hits. So, if you make a decision, let's say it's to do a law degree, we have at the moment, more than 50,000 students studying law degrees in Australia. We've got maybe 67,000 practicing solicitors. We've got this incredible oversupply of law school graduates based on the opportunities that are available. So why do young people take it? Well, because they think it's prestigious, they think it's got great career prospects, they think it's a slam dunk. None of that's necessarily true. So if we can help young people make better decisions when they're making that journey through late high school, transition to life after, they're not going to be stuck in that inertia of doing the law degree, right? Feeling like they have to pursue that pathway, struggling with what that journey looks like.
Yeah, spending 4.7 years getting a job.
That's right. So for us, it was, that's the critical point. Like, yes, you can do stuff later on that's also helpful. You can do retraining and micro-credentialing and, a whole bunch of stuff at university, leadership programs. They're all great. But actually, where we can have the biggest impact is in that sort of decision point, that critical point.
Like prevention's the best cure?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm hearing that when you're at uni, you saw a piece of this, maybe?
Definitely, yes.
Not what you see today. I mean, it was different time in one sense. And then you got it started, it's up, it's working. And then it's like some distractions hit. And you talk about your ego, and it's very... It's very transparent of you to talk about that. And it took you off on some other paths. And your ego is one of these things. It's a blind spot, I think.
Definitely.
Generally, you don't know that you don't know it's an issue.
That's right.
Until it smashes you in the head. And you're like, oh, okay. So, and in a sense, it's almost like you have to grind your ego out with a bit of mess in order to acknowledge and recognise it's there, to almost come back to full circle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So are you half grateful, half ungrateful for those experiences in terms of saying, well, if I didn't have them, I'd probably still be, thinking I was Elon Musk. But if I didn't have them, I wouldn't be where I am today.
It's definitely something I've reflected on quite a bit. I think what's interesting is that looking back, one of the things that I sort of was sharing with my wife at the time when I came back into full time to lead Artist Smart, with our renewed sort of mission and purpose, I said, you know what, I felt like I've just got my mojo back, because there'd been a period of time where I'd really felt quite lost and realizing that it wasn't necessarily the pathway for me in the prior business. And the reason I share that is because I actually think I'd found that, at least the courage to sit and listen to my heart when I was in, university in those final years. And then you're right, I got lost along the way. And so part of me is definitely like, well, if only I'd stayed true to that, how much more would we have achieved in terms of the impact we could have had? And that's definitely the pain, is looking back and going, well, if I'd stayed true to that, what could we have done differently? But at the same time, I learned so many skills.
That's right.
And I think as a result, I'm a much better leader, today than I would have been, because of those challenges and experiences that happened. I have a much better insight into the challenge and what we're needing to do. So, yeah, it's sort of this bittersweet.
Yeah. I totally get that. I have some years where I've wandered off what I potentially should have been doing, and look back and I'm grateful for the learnings, and sort of a bit nostalgic about what could have been.
That's right. I think most of all, I'm just grateful that I've sort of found it again. In terms of found great, this is who I am. And look, a lot of it was just, I think, being confident and being okay with who I am as a person, and just recognizing that, and being okay, I don't need to do something necessarily to impress other people because it sounds good. It needs to be prestigious. Actually, what do I find meaningful and purposeful? What gives me fulfillment? Let's focus on that.
Yeah. So most of the people that listen to this podcast are small and medium business owners. So they're probably mostly parents of children of all sorts of ages. What advice would you give them in terms of guiding their children in tertiary education or not? And how's Artist Smart working towards resolving that issue? Massive issue, but
yeah. So 2 questions there. I'd answer perhaps the first one first in terms of some suggestions for parents.
Yeah.
One of the things that, an analogy we often share with students is, because often they'll think about maybe buying a car, when they're 16, 17.
Yeah.
And we'll sort of say to them, look, would you just jump online and take a look at a car and then make a purchase decision? And they're like, no. I was like, oh, cool, what would you do? He's like, oh, well, I'd probably do a whole lot of research, and I'd compare it to other sort of models and makes, and I'd probably go and do some test drives and see how it feels, and then I'd make a purchase decision. It's like, cool, okay. But then if we sort of compare how we make a decision often about what we do after school, whether or not that is university or TAFE or some other option, more often than not, we do no test driving whatsoever. We literally just go, oh, yup, sounds good, law sounds good, or engineering sounds good, or accounting sounds good, maybe because a parent's done it, or I've seen it on TV. Pop culture is often the driver of decision making. And then they make a choice to go study the degree. And, they do 3 years to commit to this degree and this career, and they haven't exposed to what it might actually look like. They haven't test driven it. And so one of the simplest things we really try to encourage students to do is to, apply the same due diligence that they would if they were buying a car to thinking about their career. So for parents, it would really be, I think, to support and encourage their teenagers in particular, if they're interested in maybe doing some marketing, it'd be cool, or maybe, engineering would be interesting, to take it from just oh yeah, it's interesting, and I'm now going to put it as my UAT preference, to going, how do I take the next step to exploring what it really looks like, whether or not that's interviewing a couple of people
who work in the industry.
in it. And most people are so incredibly generous with their time, whether or not it's doing a little bit of work experience over a summer holiday, 2 or 3 days in to get a bit of a feel. It's just how can you road test and sample it a little bit before you make that sort of decision. In terms of how we support students and families go through this journey, one, we run a program called our Pathfinder program. Essentially works with students to do a couple of things. One, help them think through what are the career pathways that might be a good fit for them, how is the world of work changing, and how should they therefore think about pursuing their career, because it's not this linear framework anymore. Some already have a sense of what they want to do, and they've done some road testing and they've got a flavour. And so then what we support students do is get there. So step one is, where do you want to go? Let's help you get clarity on that. Yeah. And then what's the steps we need to basically reverse plan so that you will maximise the opportunities of making that a reality. And so in some cases that may be a whole lot of early entry, scholarship, cadetship sort of application support so that they can get those opportunities for university. Often it's a whole lot of mentoring around study and exam skills, because often what students struggle with is like the how and managing the well-being component and staying healthy to actually do their best across the journey. And then the final component is, rubber hits the road. Is there any academic requirements that you need to meet? So let's say you want to do an engineering degree, well, you're probably going to need physics.
Yep.
If you're needing to do physics, how are you going at it right now? Not so good. All right, let's put in place some tutoring so that we can help you academically make sure you're meeting the minimum standard so that you're getting into that, that whatever that pathway is. So there's, a whole bunch of sort of career mentoring that we do with students. There's a whole lot of sort of study, exam and wellbeing mentoring that we do. There's university and sort of alternate pathway planning to make a career a reality. And then there's a whole lot of academic tutoring support to actually meet minimum criteria and standards that students and families might need. So that's what we do.
Yeah, awesome. It's wonderful. I have kids myself, so I'm listening intently. In terms of growth, you've grown a lot over the last 10 years, and marketing's a key part of that. And I know that creating a lot of content is part of that. Can you talk us through your content marketing strategy?
Yeah, sure. So we probably 4 or so years ago really started that journey. We were really responding to sort of student needs, and our market needs. We are having students asking all of these questions and having all of these challenges, and we thought, well, hey, why don't we write some articles that might support students with these challenges, and in doing so, hopefully they start to trust us more. They get to know us a little bit more, and when they need help, they get in touch with us.
Yes.
And that's really where it began, and that was in some sense really, I guess a callback to how we launched the business. Off the back of a book that was providing value and tips and support. So we started that. We brought together a team of writers who were actually some of our tutors. So they understood the challenges that students were experiencing, that experienced them themselves in most cases, and started writing some articles. And within 6 months, we had seen just a significant uplift in the number of people that were visiting our website. And we got lucky. We didn't really understand SEO. We were just writing good content that we knew solved problems our audience had.
Can I just stop you there? That is SEO, and if you had have gone and understood it, inverted commas, you probably would have started doing a whole bunch of bodgy things that don't work.
Probably.
The core of SEO is, how can I help people with some great content? How can I give the best information on the internet for this particular topic?
Yep.
If you do that, Google generally figures it out.
Yeah, which is what happened for us, right?
Yeah, right. Well done.
So definitely, we went from, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years, from probably less than 1,000 people visiting our website, a month, to now we get over 1 million visitors a year. So it's been quite a journey over a relatively short period of time. But a lot of that was, just driven by understanding our audience, understanding their pain points and helping them with it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, over time, we've got a little better at realising, maybe there's some keyword data here that we should think about.
Yeah.
But definitely where it started was that. And so now we have, a number of people in a content team. But that's been really critical just in really building brand awareness of who we are, how we can support students. And then in turn, over time, because they're accessing our content, we've seen, that flow-on effect just in inquiries.
Yeah. So being helpful is a wonderful marketing tactic, because you can help 1,000 people and maybe a handful of them will do business with you, but then you might have helped 990 of them for free,
That's right.
And that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it generally pays you back. So what's next? Where's Art of Smart headed?
Yeah, good question. So look, for us, coming back into the business in 2017 full time for me was really one, exciting, but also with a vision to really grow the impact we could have. For us, that has meant, opening multiple campuses while we do online support and we do at home across New South Wales. One of the things that we know is that, people really love coming into a space and having a sense of community and support. Yep. That's really important. While we also then continue to just scale up, our one-to-one and online support at a national level. So, our journey at the moment now is really take what we do interstate and then grow campuses alongside that. So that way, if someone comes to us, we could help them online, we could help them in their own home, or if they're near a local campus, they can come in and work with us in person. And, our hope is then to be able to do that over time nationally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling us your story and your vulnerability and all the insights you've given us into your business. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, James. It was great to be able to share it.
That was Rowan Kunz, and you can find out more about his student coaching business at artofsmart.com.au. So, Jess, tell me about how he's identified his customer's problem and how he goes about resolving that.
Yeah, well, look, on his website, the main thing that he's got this big clarity statement. What am I going to do with my life when I finish school, and how do I get there? So this is the question, this is the problem that his clients have.
He's putting his finger on the question every child's asking.
He's just put it straight out there. And so by identifying that one problem, what he's doing is he's using that as the cornerstone for all of his marketing. So all of his blogs, all of his articles, his videos, his social media posts, every piece of content that he puts out, his calls to action, everything he puts out there is pointing to that problem. So whatever touch point that somebody will come in contact with Art of Smart or with his business, they know that they're in the right place because their problem is being identified. And I suppose then I've just touched on a point there, the content marketing. In your interview, Rowan spoke a lot about content marketing. I'd really like to get your insights and thoughts on content marketing.
Yeah, sure. So, the first thing is this whole people first thing that we talk about every week is that he is trying to help his customers. He's trying to be genuinely helpful. Yeah. Not just giving them content so he can get sales. He's trying to be helpful first. And it comes back to he's identified the problem. So then he's writing blogs and recording videos and providing content on his website that addresses that problem. And he says in there, if I'd have known SEO, I might have done it differently. I'm pretty stoked that he didn't know SEO in a sense.
I'm
because
glad he didn't.
It means he's gotten the first thing first, helping people. Yeah. Now, we don't throw the SEO out because what he then needs to do is essentially optimize all of that content. So if there's a blog article, there's a few things he can do. He can identify the core keyword and just make sure he's optimized the meta title and a few things like that so that he ranks for that keyword and Google knows what that article's about. But also, people are typing questions into Google all the time, and it comes up with a featured snippet, and it actually at the top of the results, you've probably seen it. It answers the question in the search results. So with a little bit of code, you can tell Google to feature that. Then you get a whole stack of traffic off the back of that as well. So the stats really bear it out that the amount of traffic to his website has massively increased. Yeah. So by putting people first and then doing the techie optimization, he's really had a
It's worked in his favour, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just being authentic and genuine in the content that he's putting out has really given him those good results.
Absolutely. In our next episode, you'll meet a woman who took a long and colourful path into business Annika Sagi. She started her career running video game arcades, then took what she'd learned about managing teams and visual merchandising into the world of yoga. She now runs 4 yoga studios under the name Nin Yoga, as well as a studio teaching circus arts. She's got an amazing vision for her business, a great ability to execute what she imagines, and what's more, she's great fun. This episode of Getting to the Heart of Business was brought to you by The Online Co, produced by Claire Bruce, music by Harry Parnwell. You can find us at theonlineco.net. If you've been listening to this and you can think of someone that you think would be really helped by it, why don't you share it with them right now? We'd love you to subscribe, leave us a review, and come along and say hello in our Facebook group.